Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and the chattering teacup will be soon back from her health resort. The PAs keep me busy and our dear CEO is enjoying one horizontal life pause after the other. Well, at least one of us can do that. But here with me from across the pond to talk about her fascinating book is author Francine Ehrenberg. Hello, Francine, and welcome at Book Lovers Companion.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're
I'm ready to
most
dive
welcome.
in.
You're most welcome. It's lovely to have you on. And we have chatted before this via Zoom a while
Yes,
back.
that was before you read the book. True.
Yeah, indeed. And I read the book, and like I said before we came on and before I started recording, the end surprised me, but I do not want to give too much away. I leave it up to you how much or how little you want to share with our listeners. So I'd say we dive right in and you tell our listeners a bit about the book, America's Candidate.
Yes. Well, in terms of what kind of sort of genre it is, the book has a lot of aspects to it. It's a murder, it's a suspense thriller. There's a political aspect to it. It's a drama. So there's a lot of different elements to the book. It doesn't necessarily fall in any one category. But as far as plot wise, it's really about this woman, Annie, and her fiance, Amir, and also her father, Ben Martin. And it's about an idea that they come up with that, not to give too much away, but that would change the political landscape and just the whole voting system, the way that it runs now in the United States. And so Annie and Amir, when they come up with this idea, they have to go to Annie's father, Ben, who happens to be a high level CEO programmer at one of the largest broadcasting networks called the Paz Network. And they have to go to him and try to convince him to air this show on the network. They take it to him, and then he also, in turn, has to convince his other cohorts, the other employees at the network, that this was something that should be done and would be beneficial to the network and really to the country. And so a large part of the book is just that whole trying to convince everyone. And then the show subsequently gets produced, and the fascinating thing about the book is sort of one of these, it's almost a cautionary tale, because it shows what could happen if something like this were to occur in the country, if the voting system were changed. It's almost be careful what you wish for in some sense. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I guess that's up for the reader to decide.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's a multi-genre book. And I've written down crime fiction, I've written down suspense. There is more to it. There's also the relationship part. And for me, what's in the book, you mentioned it in your description. It's about the role of the media in the United States. It's about the role of politics and how politics is handled. But for me, there's also another aspect in your book which I found interesting. It's work itself, work ethics. Because Annie is someone who defines herself, in my humble opinion as a European, way too much about her work.
Yeah.
She lives to work and doesn't work to live. I mean,
yeah, that's so true. And I think a lot of people, a lot of professionals fall into that. Even, myself as an attorney, for very many years, I kind of defined myself by my work, and I was a prosecutor. and which is where I got some of the ideas, I think, for
Yeah.
a lot of the, the money laundering and the criminal aspect to it. But really, I was so defined by my job, and I was never in the position that my character Annie
Mm.
was, where she was out of work for a while. But for her, it was such a desperate thing not to be working, and that took such a horrible toll on her. And she did see sort of her career as her life,
Mm.
and that's something that a lot of people, I think, deal with, and a lot of people can relate to. I think a lot of readers will recognize themselves in many aspects to Annie's character.
Mm. And also the relationship part is also interesting. But let me ask you, this whole idea for this book, you said you're a prosecutor, you're an attorney, a lawyer, but when took the idea for this book root? Because now it's out since April 2024. Here it says on Amazon. So when was it that it took root? This idea to write a book about the role of the media and the role media can play within politics.
Yeah, I think sort of the idea of media and politics probably came to me the summer before this year. I'm a trustee on this board of this program called the American Legion Jersey Boy State. And so kids who are going to be seniors in high school will come to this amazing program, and they learn everything there is to learn about politics, how voting happens, and that whole thing. And I think while I was there, I thought a lot about, like, what if there was sort of this TV show that could change that? What if we change? What if it wasn't the way that it was in the United States? So I thought about that, but I still hadn't thought, oh, I'm going to write a book. I think it was right before New Year's this year. I'm retired now, and I just had a little bit more time than I had in the past, when I was working essentially 24 hours a day. And it just was my New Year's resolution. I said, you know what? That idea that I came up with, what if there was a television show? I'm going to put that into a book, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write it. And January 1st came, and I sat down at my computer, and that's what I did. I just nonstop just wrote and wrote and wrote, and it literally just flowed out of me, the whole idea and the character development. When I first started, I didn't even know who the characters would be, how I would develop it. I didn't know I was going to put a murder into the novel. I just let it sort of free flow, and it came out to be like better than I ever could have thought that it would be.
So you said the characters, they weren't that clear in your head when you started out writing the books.
Well,
So that means basically there was the plot, the idea,
yeah,
and
yeah,
during your writing process, your characters became more refined. Let's put it
they
that way.
did. Yeah, initially when I first said, okay, I'm gonna develop this one character, Annie, I thought that she was just gonna be the main character, and I would just go with her throughout the whole book. And then after I got to the first or second chapter, I decided that it would be very interesting to obviously add other characters,
Mhm.
but to maybe make the other characters' thought processes something that whoever reads it could also understand and connect with and learn from and get into. So I ended up not knowing I was going to do this at the time, but ended up making each chapter from the three main characters, each one's point of view, one at a time. And so you could see how each one viewed the world sort of separately from the other characters. And again, that was just something very spontaneous that I never knew I was going to do until I was in the middle of doing it.
Yeah,
So,
that's something else that struck me in your book was, like you just said, you have each chapter from a different person's point of view. Not only
yeah,
that, but you took it even further. You used first person narration for each character.
yeah. I
Was that
really
also
wanted.
the idea from the beginning?
Nope. again, when I very first started, it was going to be Annie, and I actually had it in third person. So, Annie went and opened a door, or
Mm.
Annie did this, or Annie thought that. And then when I finally said, it would be much more interesting if I really let people, I felt you couldn't understand the connection between the people unless
Mm.
you heard it from their own voice. And
Mhm.
so I went back, rewrote the first chapter, and then from then on did it from first person, from that person's perspective. So you could really get sort of the tension between the
Yep.
characters and the feeling. I felt I could relate that a lot better by doing it that way. So you really would be in the mind of Ben Martin or in the mind of Amir as he's thinking and talking. And I just thought that that would be more fun on many levels.
Yeah, and we can all relate to Amir's thoughts about his boss, don't we?
Yeah.
We all
Yeah,
know such people, don't we?
we do. We know a lot of Amirs,
Oh,
except
yes.
we don't know that who he is really until the end of the book. And in
Exactly, and
fact, you actually don't really know him. If you recall in the book, that's not even really his name
yeah.
technically, and also I never gave him a last name, and I did that intentionally. Um, but so it's he's someone in some ways you never really know. He's like a ghost. He's who is he? It's
Yeah,
part of the
exactly.
prospect of the book that I love. I in the back of the book, I put all these
Mm.
book club questions
Yep.
because as I was writing, I kept even to myself, I kept thinking, "Oh, this is so interesting. I wonder what other people would think about this personality, or if I do that, or if this happens." So every time I would think that, I would make it into a book club question. And so I think to me, originally I thought Annie was going to be the most interesting character. And by the time I got to the end, I was sort of in love with the character of Amir because I just think he's fascinating and so different and just so interesting.
He is indeed, and at one point I was rooting for him, to be honest. What does that say about me? I don't know.
You're in trouble now.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I mean, you thought Annie was the most interesting character, although I have to agree, she's not really. I mean, she is interesting in her own way.
Really not. Yeah.
How she copes with the fact that she was fired or laid off after the
Yeah.
COVID pandemic, how she copes or doesn't cope with that. Also, her
Yeah.
coping mechanism is a bit
Yeah, she's got her hidden problems for sure.
indeed. And uh, before the end, before we learn about the twist, what I thought about, like I said, of Amir was, okay, I'm going to root for him. The idea is splendid. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
He was very into it. He really
Yeah.
wanted this idea to to work on many levels.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And yeah, and it's funny because and it would be interesting for me at some point to talk to other authors too about this.
Mhm.
I always wonder with authors, is there a part of you that's, the author writing it that's in the character themselves or in any characters in the book? And if I think about that from my own perspective, I would say there's very little bit about me personally that's like Annie, solely in that I did connect with how I wrote how desperate she was
Mhm.
at one time to be able to work and do her passion in life. Um, with Amir, I didn't have that much in common other than that, if he's passionate about something, he is going to go for
Mm.
it. And probably that relates to me. But the person that I really see myself most as, just personality wise, in the way that he speaks, in how I would handle situations, is actually the character of Ben Martin.
Mhm.
That is really like how I would talk, how I would have concern for my kids and want their well being and do whatever I could to help them, and how I would interact with my coworkers and employees. And when a bad situation happens, sort of taking that leadership role and making sure
Yeah.
everyone's okay. And at the part of the book where he's very angry and he wants to address the public about what's
Yeah.
happening with the show, that's like my voice speaking through Ben Martin. And so he's the character, if there is one character that really I connect with the most and that I feel really is my personality,
Mhm.
it's Ben Martin. But
Yeah,
in
he's yeah, I absolutely agree. He's an intrinsically nice guy, actually, despite the fact
yeah,
that he's that high up in the hierarchy of the network. He
yeah,
kept the nice part of his personality, so to speak.
true.
And that's something
Exactly.
that's a feat in itself, come to think
Yeah,
of, you know, how backstepping I
absolutely.
suppose this business can be.
Yeah,
That also brings me to the question. Now that you mentioned his speech he had to give during the broadcasting of this show, America's
yeah.
Candidate, what do you personally, since it came from media and politics and so on, the role of the media in American politics? I know it's a tricky question, but what are your thoughts, besides the fiction you created?
I think that most myself and probably most people think that the media can be very dangerous, and have a tremendous impact, on politics. That news reporting really has changed a lot, at least since from when I was a kid, where it was all just strictly factual. This is what happened. Someone drove down the street, something happened to them, and it was all just facts, facts, facts. And I think, as I'm aging now, and the way things are now with the media, there's a lot of opinion and agenda, that's now incorporated with the American media, and it has a huge influence on politics, on what people think and how they perceive things. And I think it's a dangerous thing, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this book as well, is to let people understand, like, if this continues to get out of control with the media having such influence, like, this is a precautionary tale of what could happen. um and it's could be very scary. And so let's do something now. I don't know what exactly, but to control the media, or to just make sure that it's fair, impartial, factual reporting, and that the news is treated fairly.
Mm.
So I think that's just sort of my sense.
And what about the influence of social media? When you look at platforms like, let's say, TikTok or X, Twitter, whatever, Mew, I like to call it. Um, Lots of people get their only information from platforms like this. Not so much from the traditional media, but from short videos that, of course, cannot tell the truth at all and are
Yeah, and
not supposed to tell the truth, maybe, in a way. Um, the dangers are great, I suppose, or as we can see when you look at what
absolutely.
happened in the United States
It really
specifically.
is. It can be scary and dangerous, and so much influence. And like you said, that some people don't even realize they're being influenced. It's like psyops, like psychological
Mm,
operations,
mm,
which I studied in the military. I also was in the military for 12 years, a major in the Army JAG Corps, but I also took courses at the JFK Special Warfare Center in school at Fort Bragg, as a civil affairs officer. So I traveled, around, and we did humanitarian
mm,
assistance and disaster relief. But one of the things that we also learned a lot about was psyops, psychological operations, and how you can influence people, and how people don't necessarily even realize they're being influenced. And I think that social media and, the news and, many different platforms, has that impact on people that they don't even necessarily know they're being targeted and influenced. And I think if people could wake up to that a little more, you could still listen to those things, but you have, sort of in your mind, you know what to look for, and you know not to necessarily take things at face value. So it's just important that people understand that aspect of it. Because I don't know if you'll ever be able to influence
mm.
there's so much economics behind, the media.
Yeah.
They're there to make money, and they wanna, do whatever sells in some respects. So whether just by morality you can change the people who are doing that, I don't know, without also changing their economic aspect to it and what they're gonna get out of it economically. But if you wake people up to what's happening, then it won't have as much effect and influence. People know they're being, influenced by, the media.
Mm,
So,
yeah. Especially like we said, sorry, social media.
yeah,
That
absolutely. It's huge
that
these days.
that's why I only follow cat content.
I don't blame you.
No,
It's
not only
safer that way.
yeah, not
Yeah,
only just cat content, but also authors and publishers
yeah,
and so on. But certainly not politicians and political parties.
for
Uh,
sure.
well,
I mean, that's how people end up that, as the book shows that when people have different opinions, unfortunately, it's not always addressed in a healthy manner,
yeah,
where people have, nice discourse and have the
yeah,
freedom to exchange differing ideas.
yeah,
And unfortunately, it can become violent
yeah,
and people won't even hear other ideas or won't listen, and I think the book shows the impact of something like that happening. And I could realistically see that. It does happen even now where people just are so divided in their beliefs
yeah.
that can they come to a common ground? I don't know.
Yeah, and especially when you think of debates between candidates and the media, they staged it. Let me put it that way. From my
Yeah.
perspective, it is like a show. It happens like a show. When we look
Yeah.
at the United States, and they have this role, you have this moderator who doesn't moderate, because when questions are asked and answered in a way that is left unchallenged, then one wonders, then why are you here? It is your role to challenge an answer that is completely
Yeah.
illusional.
Yeah. I mean, part of the problem, I think, also is when these debates occur, at least the presidential debates, I mean, they have maybe an hour on television and like once or maybe twice before the
Yeah.
election. And that's it. You don't really get to
Mm.
see it again, or you don't see it beforehand and
Yeah.
you don't get to
Yeah.
hear more debating afterwards. It's only,
Yeah.
those limited times during the election. So, they get up there and they make a show of it rather than have nice political discourse. And it's sad because it becomes so demeaning, and they're up there and they're just knocking each other out and and you don't see like the type of decorum that you would
Yeah.
expect really from a political candidate. You would hope that they would hold themselves with pride and speak in a respectful manner
Yeah.
and respectful to the whole political system. But that doesn't always occur. And
No.
I think I see it getting worse as the years go by. And
Mm.
I'd like to see it maybe in the future, if like my book shows what could happen if we let it all continue to get out of
Yeah.
control. Like to see it pulled back and have just meaningful talk like adults, speaking, in a nicely to each other, and you could hit all the tough the tough discussions, but do it in a way that shows your character and
Exactly. Yeah.
integrity and like that.
In a dignified manner.
Absolutely, that's the bottom line.
I
Yeah,
mean, don't mention a hairstyle, a dress style. It's not the important
no,
thing. It's also something that
right.
happens here in Europe quite often when you listen to other people talk about, the other candidate, or even like we said, the media. Why should
Yeah,
I care? Why should I care what this person is wearing?
exactly.
I
It's just
mean,
ridiculous.
serious.
Yeah,
What
let's
what
talk
is
about
he
what's
or
good for the
she?
country and how
Yeah,
we're going to
yeah,
solve problems and issues,
exactly.
and not talk about just the ridiculous things that make people feel heated and angry.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about this whole political system in the United States? Because this is a main point where the story focus on and where this whole idea of American candidate is rested on. We have to change something. We have to change something because the system doesn't work for everybody. You have to be
Right.
rich to be part of the system, maybe even to change something. What can you tell us about that?
I think that's a big part of the book. I think they discuss why they feel this show would be so important because it would finally give people who are in this country and a part of this country just as much as anybody else a voice and the ability to speak and to lead because there are many people who would be exceptional, amazing leaders who have the wisdom, the experience, and the intelligence, but don't have the financial resources or capacity to be able to even think about ever running for political office. It really is, you have to be, a super wealthy person to be able to run in this country for political office at those highest levels. And so a lot of people who really would be good for that role, people who people could connect with and understand and have again that wisdom and that intelligence, integrity, honor, they can't run solely because they don't have the economic ability to do it. So I think the book addresses that was why
Yeah.
I thought the show could be so great.
Yeah.
If there was a show like that, anyone who could come and
Yeah.
America could see everyone and compete and see really who would be the best for the country.
Absolutely.
Um, but
But it's
unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily work out that well in the book.
it
But it's a
does
great
not.
idea. But
Yeah,
whether if the public could use it in a way it was meant to have been used, it would have been a
absolutely.
great thing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But there's also the question of the whole voting system. It's not only the question of the candidates in the United States. And that's something we, the teacup and I, and most of the people here in Europe can't wrap our mind around the system of you vote for the president, you have this public vote, and then you have this electoral college,
Yeah.
whatever how you pronounce it, and that's in the end what decides who is the next president of the United States. I mean,
Yeah.
he or she is not really in the end voted into office by the public.
Well, that's a controversial thing. I mean, there's probably a division within the country of people who feel we should go with the popular vote versus people who feel that no, this is the way that we should be doing it by this electoral college. So it's really split as to opinions as to
Mhm.
which way we should move forward or which way what is fair and what is correct. I really focused more on the who should be allowed,
Yeah,
I think within the book,
yeah,
than sort of the figuring out,
mm,
should we change that
yeah,
aspect of the system as well? It was
mm,
more like I just thought that people would want other people because it the criticism often is that you have these two candidates, a Democrat or Republican,
mm,
who end up being the two final in the end and how they were chosen and how they got there, and a lot of people are never happy with just those two choices, but
mm,
that was your two, that was it. You had a very few select people you could
yeah,
choose from that was going to be your candidate to run, whether you're Democrat
yeah,
or Republican or independent. And so the book really addressed that, giving more of an opportunity to people who never would have been seen in the past or given a chance in the past
mm,
to be able to have some influence and be able to be a leader of the country.
mm,
I don't know if that will ever change. I mean, I don't know if you could take the
mm.
economics and how much money you need to do these things out of the equation, unless you get a billionaire network who will be willing to do this. But other than that,
Mhm.
I don't know.
I mean, interesting. You don't have to be a millionaire in Austria to become president,
Yeah,
but or chancellor for that. I mean,
true. I mean, you don't
that's
necessarily have to be, but it require to run these
yeah,
campaigns. I mean,
yeah,
it's just a fortune.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah,
I mean, like you said, the idea, I found it interesting and fascinating, and it could have worked. Then we are
yeah,
back to the role of the media, although from your book, I didn't get the impression that the broadcasting network, although they are, of course, interested again in the money and its economics, and, they
yeah.
still do not use it in a way that it is meant to stir up unrest.
Yeah. I don't know if I
That's a
when I
side
wrote it,
product.
yeah, I think that was a byproduct of what the network did. I think that, Ben Martin, especially if he really is me in male form, would never have wanted something like that to happen. I
Yeah,
mean, he wanted to probably,
yeah,
in his eyes, he thought this would be a really good thing for the country.
yeah,
And he thought that he'd be doing a real service and something that could benefit
yeah.
everyone. And I don't think he anticipated, until maybe it was too late, the damage that this could potentially do if it wasn't really used the right way.
Mm,
Unfortunately, it ended up dividing people even more
mm,
than it did before they had that system, and created more divisiveness and more conflict among people.
yeah.
Um, and so that was problematic.
Was Lionel, his boss, more clear-sighted in this regard?
I think so. I think, Lionel did not think that this show should go forward, and I think he understood the implications
Yeah.
that, um, it's not necessarily gonna be a good thing. Like, your intentions could be great, but it may not work out that way, and so it's more dangerous to go forward with something like this than it would be to not do it. And I think Lionel and 2 others in that group also would have voted that way. But ultimately, as we know,
Mhm.
they did vote to make the show, and, what happened happened
Yeah,
as a
true. And I always wonder when I talk to authors who write about not only crime fiction, but also put in the political aspect of things in their books. Also, another guest of mine, he was also a prosecutor. And the question always is what kind of personality does one need to be exceptionally successful in this kind of job? Maybe the same character traits as a politician?
You mean a prosecutor?
For
And
example.
yeah, I would say probably you do need a lot of the same character traits. I mean, you obviously, to be both a prosecutor and to be a politician, you have to be somebody who's comfortable speaking to people. You have to it's nerve wracking, especially when you're a young prosecutor and you have your
Mm,
very first jury trial and you get up and they're all there staring at you and you have to speak.
yeah.
But you learn to be very comfortable with that because that's your job. But so
Yep.
you have to be somebody who's both politician and as a prosecutor, somebody who is very well read, who understands who's very reality based, who understands things like factually and
Yep.
um and you have to be rational, a rational person, and really just somebody who speaks and enjoys talking and intelligent. And I think those are very similar qualities that you would want both in a politician and in a prosecutor, and somebody with the heart, who has the desire and the heart and the passion. Hopefully, you hope politicians really are there because they want to do good. They care about the country. They care about what's good for
Yeah.
people and for, solving problems and solutions. And they have that honor within them that has nothing to do with trying to gain money and economics and stuff. It's really supposed to be your civic duty.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you should be a good person who's doing this for other people, selfless service. And that's what you
Yeah.
want to see both in your prosecutors and in your politicians, but unfortunately we don't always see.
Yeah, true. But is there also, when we put also CEOs into the mix, Is there also a certain amount of ruthlessness required?
Yes, there can be. I mean, you have to be willing to do the job until you get the job done, and unfortunately, that can be harsh at times. That can be a tricky way to you face moral battles at times, and you face sticky
Mm,
situations as a prosecutor, and even when I used to be a defense attorney, there as well, of situations and things that occur and happen that are difficult to deal with, and you just have to always, I mean, if you want to do it the
yeah,
right way, you just always have to do the right thing instead of, even if it's harder than the easier wrong thing. It's very easy to fall into, oh, I want to win at all costs, but it's not really about that. It should be about justice and just doing the right thing and working hard. And you hope that
yeah,
those are the qualities that will come through, instead of the ruthlessness. But there is a level of, at least you got to be a fighter.
uh,
You have to be willing to fight for the principles and the ideals of what your job
yeah.
entails.
Amir does have a certain amount of ruthlessness, doesn't he?
Oh, yes, he does. He sure does. And it's not something you really understand, I think, until you get to the
Yeah,
very end.
yeah.
And I don't wanna give anything away, but,
No, no.
Amir, yeah, he is, I think, not who he really seems to be from the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
But you have to question, even at the end, he does say, there's a line that I used in the book that
Mhm,
comes from Amir, and it's, "The enemy of one country is the hero of another country." And I
mm,
think there's a lot of truth to that. You're asking people to be a hero to your country and do
mm,
whatever it takes, and that
yeah,
makes you the enemy of another country.
yeah.
But if you were to look at Amir maybe from the perspective of whatever country he comes from, I don't know how they would view him. How would
Mm,
they see what he sacrificed or what he did or what he gave in order to help his people? So
mm.
that's another book club question. That's,
Eh,
I love to hear people's thoughts on it, on different ways and views that you can look at some of these characters, because
yeah,
it
true.
none of them are one-sided. There's so many aspects to them and so many levels of their thought process and their actions, that you don't have to necessarily see someone, or one of these characters, as any one narrow way.
Yeah, yeah. True. I mean, how would you say in the end, where does it leave Annie as a character in your book?
I think we're ripe for a sequel.
Mhm.
I've So many people have said, "You gotta do a sequel, I can't just not know what happens."
Yeah,
I think, who knows? Annie could go so many different ways.
exactly.
I think it's gonna be up to me as an author to sort of decide, if I choose to do a sequel, what's gonna I actually, in my mind, have ideas for 3 separate books. I thought it would be interesting to even do a prequel. Like, how did Amir
Mhm.
get to where he
Yeah,
met Annie in the first place? What was his life before, and how
yeah.
did he get there? And then I thought, obviously, a sequel where we find out what happens to Annie and Amir subsequently, and then even another book down the road, what happens to their twins? Where
Mm.
where,
Yep,
how do they end up in
yep,
life, and what happens to them as adults? And
yep,
there's so many, just so many ideas that are running through my head,
yep.
and so many ways I could go with this and things I could do. And I'm also interested in what would happen with the characters of Devin and Calypso, two
Yeah,
other characters.
indeed, indeed, indeed. And that's what I thought when I finished the book. I thought, okay, next book, when is it coming?
I know, I have not even started yet. We're in the process of doing college applications for my son, so
Uh,
things are busy. But I really want to, and so many people who've read it are so enthusiastic about it. It makes me really happy. I have a real sense of pride over that, and a lot of people are like, you have to get this into a movie, make this into a movie, which I have no control over. So,
Yeah.
if anyone wants to make a movie, I'd love that. But as far as a sequel, yeah, I do intend to do one. I just don't know when I'm going to do it.
Well, movie or TV show,
Yeah.
Netflix and Amazon and Apple TV, if you're listening.
Give me a call.
Yes, indeed.
Let's
And
talk.
yeah, I fully agree. And having spoken about all the aspects of your book, let me ask you this. How fictional is this fiction of yours?
Good question. I mean, again, as I said, it's sort of a precautionary tale. It hasn't happened yet, but we could be getting there. It could be someday somebody could read back on that and have it not be a fiction at all. That it, it could be a nonfiction reality. What really happens and occurs in the book. As of now, it is completely fictional. Other than there's one aspect to the book where I talk about a certain money laundering scheme that occurred at the hedge fund firm where Amir was working. And that's based on a conglomeration of a few cases that I really in reality worked on. So that part of it really isn't necessarily fiction. But the characters are all, figments of my imagination. They're all fiction. And there is no show yet on TV or anywhere that I know of that candidates can run, and a network will use its money to help a specific candidate that's chosen by America. So as of now, it's fiction, but stay tuned.
Oh, yeah, but it should be, shouldn't it? I mean,
Yeah, if it can
uh,
be done right, it would be just amazing. It
yeah,
would make so many changes in this country that a lot of
yeah,
people would like to see, that it
yeah, I
could
can imagine.
really change things for the better if used the right way. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, Francine, you've talked a little bit about this writing process of yours, which I suppose quite a few authors are envious of. How fast and how easy it flowed for you, this getting
Really.
this idea on the paper. Um, but there was also a lot of editing involved. Like you said, you started out with third person narration, then you changed it into first person narration. Um, what about keeping track of all the threads in your novel? Do you have any advice or tips on that? How you can make that happen? Do not get lost in the plot.
Yeah, I don't know if I have tips because I don't think that I did this the way most authors do this. I think a lot of authors have an outline and they kind of work off of an outline, and they um have an idea for what
Mhm.
they want to do, and then write that part and then maybe come back to other parts. And for me it was just total stream of consciousness, really. I had no outline, no idea really what I was doing, and it just flowed out of me. And I don't think I could give advice because I don't know how to make that happen for somebody else. I just was writing and it flowed from me, and I felt almost inspired in some ways. My aunt she had passed away about a year before I started
Mm.
writing, and she was 95 years old, Adrienne Macha, and she was the curator of films at the Museum of Modern Art in New York for 30 years, a very artistic person, had won so many awards with her work on films nationally, internationally. She'd been knighted. She just is anybody who knows her knows. And she always encouraged me to write because I would write poems as a kid, but I'd
Mhm.
never
Mhm.
written short stories or novels or anything along those lines. But after she passed, that was also an inspiration for me sort of to write, because I knew it always brought my little poems and stuff brought her pleasure, and she loved my writing. And so I kind of almost felt her presence almost in a weird way. Um, I'm not a religious person, but I felt her presence. And I feel like that sort of was with me and sort of helped me through the book writing process.
Mm.
Um, but it just once you're inspired, I guess if there was a piece of advice, it would be once you're inspired, sit down and do it. Don't procrastinate. Just sit down and really just
Yeah.
get started. Start typing, feel it right from your heart. Imagine yourself in that situation and just
Mhm.
go.
Yeah.
And I think that was how I did it.
Yeah. She tried so hard. And what did she wrong? She became a lawyer, the girl. Good Lord.
Right. Originally, I wanted to be a psychologist when I was in college, and then at the last minute, I'm like, "Oh, I guess I'll go to law school." Just changed my mind and
Oh.
went in that instead.
And what about the writing community? Because a lot of authors often point out how important it is for them in their writing process, in getting things right and getting feedback for what they have written, even during the process of writing. How was it for you?
I never asked while I was writing, I didn't show it to anybody, didn't
Hmm.
talk about it with anybody. I wanted it sort of to be my little secret because it was still a secret even unto myself because I didn't know what I would write until I was sitting down writing it. So as I progressed, I just did not want to tell anybody. I didn't want to discuss the idea of the show. I didn't want to talk about anything. I wanted to just focus, get it done, and have a book in my hand and be able to say, wow, this is mine and I did this myself. And so I never did talk with other writers. I never did speak with friends or family about it. I just sat down and did it. Um, the hard part is really now, because I want so many people to read this. I feel like the people I know who have read it have loved it and they want more. But I feel like no one knows the book
Yep.
exists even. And I'm not a marketing person. I don't know how to do the whole marketing aspect of it. And so that's my fear, is that it's just, there's a lot of amazing, wonderful novels out there, but nobody knows they exist. And it's almost like being president. There's a lot of people out there
Yep.
who could be president,
Yep.
but nobody knows they exist. And it's the same thing with the book. Until people spread the word or something, somehow, I don't
True.
know,
Especially if you are self-published or independently published, it's hard.
it's tough.
And
It's tough.
yeah, I mean, speaking from the reader's point of view, I mean, if there weren't so many independent authors who have reached out to our podcast, I would have never, ever read their books because I wouldn't have found them.
What do
They
you
do
know?
not pop
Yeah,
up in your search history, or you
absolutely. Yeah.
you do not even get something from Amazon in this regard. We always get
Yeah,
the same things, and again that
I know.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, cookie cutter books.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things for me. I don't want to write the same book everybody else wrote and the same
Yeah.
style and the exact same plot. Because
Yeah.
when you're a reader, especially somebody like me, like I love suspense novels. I love to be grabbed and not know what's going to happen and have a twist. And you read so many of them, at some point you almost can figure these things out in advance, and then
Yeah.
it's not suspenseful and it's not twisty for you. So I felt like it was really important that I really wanted to do something completely out of the box, completely different, and that would take people by surprise. And hopefully I achieved that.
Oh
I
yes.
like to
Oh
think,
yes. Oh
yeah.
yes. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
But it's a tough world out there for writers.
yeah.
When I finished this book, also, I thought about, oh, maybe I should, look into getting a literary agent or sending it to a publishing house or something. But there's all these, I don't even know how to do that. Like it's a huge process to do that, and a waiting game from
Yeah.
the little that I do know about it. You send out these sort of queries and these letters, and then you just sit and wait and hope somebody
Yeah.
responds. And I didn't want to do that. Like I sat down, I wrote this thing, and it meant so much to me to have it out there finally. And so I just said, I'm going to self-publish. And again, unfortunately, the trade-off is no one knows it exists, but it's still a great feeling to be like, I have my book in my hand and I wrote this and it's my work and I did this,
Yes.
It's a great feeling.
And now even more people will know about this because that's the
Thank you.
beauty. That's the beauty of social media when you tell them, read this book and listen to the author, what he or she has to say. And you have given me an idea for another discussion, which you will be on, of course, a
Oh my
panel
God, yes,
discussion.
I would love that. Anytime, my pleasure. I have
Yes.
so enjoyed chatting with you. It's been wonderful.
I'm not done yet. I have one more question because
That's great.
you have probably heard that before, and you are probably annoyed when I ask it, but I have to ask. You said you were the JAG Corps.
Yes.
And of course, yes, dear listeners, yes, even I fall in the trap. I have to, because I did watch this show. What did they get right in this show?
You mean the show in the movie, the JAG
Yeah,
movie?
the TV show,
You
the
could have
TV.
oh, honestly, I watched the movie because
Ah,
the movie A Few Good Men, which really kind of highlighted what the JAG Corps even was to people,
okay.
came out the year that I actually joined the Army JAG
Ah,
Corps. But I never watched the show.
okay.
I couldn't even I watched the movie. I can recite you to the point of being annoying. I could recite almost every line from the movie. I eat breakfast. I could do all that, the Jack Nicholson lines and everything.
Okay.
But I didn't really watch the show, and I think
Mm,
it's just I was just either deployed somewhere or I was
okay.
just busy doing whatever the Army had me doing at the time, and just never got around to watching the TV show.
Okay. No, so then tell me, what did the movie get right?
All right. The movie got kind of in some ways, the courtroom aspect of it right,
Mm,
that you're in
okay.
there and you're sort of fighting and, you're especially because in the Army, I was a trial defense attorney. So I wasn't prosecuting cases, which is what I did after the Army. During the time that I was in the
Mm,
Army, I was defending the soldiers who defend our
okay.
country.
Okay.
And they would be charged with everything that you would in the civilian world:
Mm,
rapes, robberies, murders, financial crime, whatever could
yeah.
happen in civilian world also could happen
Yeah.
within the military. So it's very true that the type of lawyer you have to be in order to be successful, just like in the movie, you have to have the heart and the passion and the ability to advocate for your client. And I think that's what the movie got right, just being an advocate for your client.
Oh, okay. I see. We have talked, coming back to your books, of course, we have talked about maybe hopefully there is a sequel, and
I
hopefully
hope
there is a prequel. Are these the plans for the nearer future?
they're definitely the plans for the future. Whether I'll make it another New Year's resolution and start, right after the New Year's. But I have to say honestly, with the things that are on my plate right
Mm.
now, I doubt that I'll get to it before the New Year. But I do hope that like starting in January, I'll get started writing again. And I don't know whether I'll do a prequel first or the sequel. I don't know.
Mm.
We'll have to see.
Mm. Either
Probably.
way,
But either way,
it
something.
absolutely, and it will be absolutely intriguing to read.
Even I wanna know what's gonna happen because I haven't
See,
thought about it yet,
see, there you
but
have it.
yeah.
Now you have to.
I have some idea. I do have
Eh,
ideas swirling around in there, and there's so many good ones, but I wanna do it justice and, again, kind of make whatever I do suspenseful and
okay.
not something that you see coming right away, and
Mm,
so I think, that's gonna take a little bit of a time,
mm,
but that's what I
yeah.
hope to do.
Let it simmer.
Yes, exactly.
So splendid. Francine, is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
Just that, as I had said in the beginning, I just wanted them to realize that in the very back of the book, there are all these questions that would be great for book clubs. And just even if you're not in a book club, just to sort of at the end, after you're done reading it, to read through the questions so you can be sort of part of the wonder of the whole book and the thought process and wondering what happens and why this happened and what would I do in this situation. And I just think that the questions are very provocative and will really add to the just sort of joy of reading the whole book. And that's really all that I'd want everyone to know.
Good. We couldn't answer the questions because then we would have given too much away, of course.
I know. No, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, dear listeners, you have to read it. You will enjoy it. Believe me.
Thank you, Edith. It's been such a pleasure. I feel like I've made a new friend now.
Same here. Absolutely. And Francine, please don't go away. I will meet you shortly in the green room. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you.
I'll stand by. Thank you.
Good. Dear listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode as much as my guest and I did. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see each other again at another episode of Book Lovers Companion. Until next time.